Hey everybody, Kevin here, back with the next installment on our video blog. I think I just wanted to start this video with a quote that I read, actually in a book that's sort of been catalytic for me recently. It's a book by a guy I really admire. The book is called The Faith of Leap, and it's written by Alan Hirsch and Michael Frost. It's called Embracing a Theology of Risk and Adventure and Courage. So I think this book, God used it in sort of a seminal way to spark a lot of things in my heart. He actually uses this quote that he got from, he thinks it was sourced from Picasso. And Picasso says this really cool statement. He says, "The best way to preserve tradition is not to wear your father's hat, but to have children." And I really like that idea because what that's saying in essence is, we don't want to perpetuate a traditionalism. What we want to have is living tradition. Thomas Aquinas once said the best way to see into the future is to stand on the backs or the shoulders of giants, not to stab them in the back. And so we want to really preserve the rich heritage that the church has, but we don't want to do it at the expense of what God is doing. In other words, for the sake of preserving what God has done, we don't want to limit what God is doing. And I think throughout church history, we've got wonderful denominations that were started as genuine works and movement of what God was doing. God really did something in the Reformation. It's a footprint of God. It's reality. We want to honor that tradition. God did things through the Wesleyan revivals and the work of Finney, right, and the work of Jonathan Edwards and many others. But God, those are footprints, and God is still walking. And so we don't want to have this traditionalism that limits what God is doing for the sake of preserving what God has done. We want to honor those things while at the same time embracing what God is doing. And so this leads me to my point of that, all ecclesiology, or all the study of the church, flows from Christology, or study of Christ. And so, form follows function. What is the church for? Well, then we need to look at who Jesus is, basically. So everything boils down to the person of Christ. It's proper ecclesiology. I want to read something that I wrote, and this is unedited. I just wrote it in my journal. I work as a nurse, and just throughout the day I carry this in my pocket, and as the Lord is talking or speaking, something pops into my head. I really want to honor what the Lord is saying, and so when He says something, I pull it out of and I just start writing down. And usually the Lord speaks to me in seminal form, just something really small, but as I turn my attention to it, it starts growing into something bigger. And I feel like the Lord really directs me in that way. But I wrote, "The aim of ministry is not safety. All ecclesiology flows from Christology, or a proper understanding of the person of Christ, who is the image of God. If our view of Christ is that He is meek and mild, unoffensive, and politically correct, then we will fashion a church in that false image." In other words, our Christology will inform our ecclesiology, and we'll begin making a church that doesn't want to offend anyone. It wants to be politically correct and not ever say anything that ruffles any feathers. But as we look at Jesus in the Bible, that's not the Jesus of the Bible. Jesus is a wild Messiah. He said things that were offensive both to the religious structure of His day, to the politics of His day. He upturned social stratospheres, and He said the last will be the first. He said the least important is the most important. That we honor the ones who really society doesn't honor. That's why churches are planted biblically, not by pastors. They're planted by apostles and prophets, because it's those men who are walking in the wild lands of the Spirit. It's those guys who have taken their little boat and launched out into the depths of the knowledge of God. And they begin to create a culture that is wild and untamed and orthodox. It drops a plumb line from heaven, and it creates from that. And it actually creates something that what the Bible says, and referring to the Apostle Paul in Acts 17, that guy who turned cities upside down has come here also. More of the same is not going to produce something fundamentally different. And I think the church has this theology that if we just do more of the same thing, something will happen. To reach people that haven't been reached, or we need to do things that people haven't been doing. And so I got my little 3-year-old boy knocking on the door and coming in here. I'll be there in just a second, buddy. We can't shield people from a wild Messiah. We do it to our own peril. We end up producing fragile Christians. And that's the benefit of persecution, because persecution ultimately cleanses the church of the half-committed and the easily offended. And so I want to just encourage us to really embrace a theology based on a wild Messiah. Thank you.